God with a spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, right now we will take attendance. Alderman O'Brien is present. Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Klee is on an excused absence this evening. Alderman Moran. Alderman Lopez. Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Here.
Alderman Como.
Present.
Alderman Dow.
Present.
Alderman Caveva.
Here.
Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderman Tebow.
Here.
Alderwoman Timmons. And Alderman Laurie Wilshire is on an excused absence. As per our president's acceptance, also not in attendance this evening will be His Honor the Mayor, James W. Donches, and Corporation Counsel Stephen A. Bolton. As past presidents by our president of the board, I will now turn the meeting over to the chairman of the Budget Review Committee, Richard A. Dowd. Alderman Dowd.
Thank you. This evening, we're going to have a public hearing on R-22-074, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $1,500,000 for turbine work and various repairs and improvements to the Jackson Mills and Mines Falls hydroelectric facilities. Is someone here that's going to give us an overview? Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director. I'm joined this evening by Deb Chisholm, the city's sustainability manager and also our resident expert in City Hall on the city's hydroelectric facilities here in the city, representing the $1.5 million request to bond improvements to both the Jackson Mills turbine and the Mines Falls hydroelectric turbine as well. Before we get into the specifics of the request and talk a little bit about the background here, I did want to pass it off to Ms. Chisholm to provide just a very high-level overview of the two facilities that we'll be discussing this evening to provide you with some context. Again, for newer members of the board, we thought that a brief discussion of this would be helpful. There have been prior bond requests in front of this body, but it's been several years, and so we always feel it's a good reminder to demonstrate what our division is working on, particularly in the context of hydroelectricity and our sustainability efforts. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Deb to talk a little bit about these two facilities that we're discussing this evening.
Ms. Chisholm.
Hi, good evening. Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Department Manager, formerly known as Waterways Manager, and a Hydro Manager. Really quick, the city does actually own two hydroelectric facilities. Only city in the state that actually has two hydro facilities that are up and running right now. Jackson Mills, if you're familiar with the Margarita's restaurant and the dam that runs across the river towards the library. One facility there, and the other facility, the Mine Falls facility, over near Mine Falls Park, where there's a boat launch near Stello Stadium. So those are the two that we're here to talk about tonight very briefly. The city has not owned them very long. We acquired the Jackson facility in 2015, and the Mine Falls facility we purchased in 2017. The current way that things operate with the hydroelectric facilities is we hire a contractor to actually do the operation and maintenance of both of those facilities. I don't have any idea how to actually operate either one. I don't even know where the on-off switch is on those. But as you can see from the pictures, they're fairly considerable facilities. I have lived in Nashville most of my life and did not even know that we had these facilities until about a decade ago. So that was a little bit embarrassing for me when I took on this role, but They were both built in the 80s, and now 1980s doesn't seem all that long ago, but the way that the equipment goes, that equipment is quite aged at this point. So back a couple of years ago, we did come in front of the board, some of you were there at the time, to bond $6.2 million for a turbine upgrade project. So the Jackson Mills facility has one turbine, it's a 1 megawatt facility. The Mine Falls has actually 2 turbines in it for a total of 3 megawatts. And the one at Jackson has been operating. It's still the same turbine that was installed in the 1980s. It's still operating great. We were trying to be proactive by replacing that turbine. We've been very diligent about doing the operation, maintenance, upkeep of that facility. But as I had explained to Matt a little bit earlier, it's like you're like your grandma's car. She gives it to you, doesn't seem to have a whole lot of miles on it, but once you get it, then you start realizing it takes a little bit of extra money to keep things up and running. So both of those facilities have some aged equipment. Again, the turbine at Jackson is the one that we had selected to move forward with replacing before it actually broke. So we are in the process of doing that now. We were hoping that we were going to have replaced it last year, but FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, had some other ideas for us. They are still in the process of reviewing our application to do that replacement. And so while we're waiting, we're incurring some additional costs. I don't want to get too far into the financial weeds of that. But both of those facilities, when they're fully up and running, generate in a year about 15,000 megawatts of power. And that is enough to, just to give you a comparison, that could generate enough power for about 2,000 homes for a year. So it's a fairly considerable amount of power generation that goes on with those two facilities.
And I'll start by just providing an overview of what the intended use of this $1.5 million of request is, and Deb will interject as any points are missed on my end. But Deb began to allude to the fact that our permitting process through the federal government has been substantially delayed. Despite timely permit submissions and indications from the folks at the federal level, that process has been delayed by a year at this point and is likely going to be delayed for many months beyond this current point. However, we do intend to move forward with the replacement project in the summer of 2023, but we await the permit notification from the federal government. We're working hard through our congressional representation to try to move the federal reviewers along, but based on COVID and other delay circumstances, that permit has taken time to be granted and received by the city. With that delay comes several unanticipated consequences, and I want to point out actually something that's a little deep in this slide, but we've purchased a turbine. We have a replacement turbine that's sitting in the Czech Republic currently. It's built, custom built for us. We've actually had great consternation about whether or not we should move that turbine to the United States based on circumstances in that section of Europe. A little interesting getting a force majeure letter based on war between Russia and Ukraine, so it's been a very interesting time for us. But nevertheless, the turbine sits and costs are incurred. And those costs relate not only to the warranty, to shipping, that's a bit of an unknown, but also to securing a contractor to actually perform the work. As you all know, the volatility of the construction market, both from materials and a labor perspective, has been incredible over the past few years. And so based on current estimates, our construction contract that we had secured a year ago has now increased in price by about $900,000 in total. Adding in these other expenses of storage, shipping, our warranty extension, and additional electrical interconnection costs based on that delay, we've estimated about $1.2 to $1.3 million of additional expense that will need to be incurred as part of the project based on this delay through the federal permitting process. I do also want to comment on the fact that we are requesting a 30-year bond. That was a deliberate approach that was discussed with CFO Griffin and the mayor, This is truly a generational improvement at the turbine. This is an improvement that will not need to be, hopefully, redone within that 30-year period of time. This is really the heart of the facility, and we don't anticipate anything beyond minor repair work during that period of time. But really, this is that's the core of the request that we're making this evening. That's the extension costs for the Jackson Falls turbine replacement. We're also requesting, as part of this $1.5 million authorization, some additional funds to begin some of the design and permitting work and moving the ball forward, really, on what we anticipate will be some upgrades needed to the Mines Falls relicensing. As part of the Mines Falls relicensing, and I had a great conversation with Deb, just sort of retouching on what that involves today. And primarily the improvements here are aimed at fish passage. There really are, let's say, 5 to 6 critical bullet points below this upstream and downstream fish passage bullet. But these are all regulatory requirements by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that are required as part of any permitting or relicensing process that we do with the turbine facility. And so what we're really trying to do is position ourselves so that we can have a set of permitting documents and at least begin the conversation with our consultants to start that relicensing program in earnest. And Deb, did you want to add anything to those comments on what the scope of improvements are?
I can give you some details. As Matt has indicated, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, the New Hampshire Department of Fish and Game, they all have a say when there is some sort of approval that has to go on with a hydroelectric license, or in the case of the Jackson facility, we actually have a license exemption. But to place an amendment on that exemption to replace the turbine also requires the federal agencies, what I call the fish agencies, it requires their approval. So they have us a bit over a barrel when it comes to actually getting their approval to move forward with anything. So it's a bit of what I consider and have suggested to them to be a bit of an unfunded mandate, where they're requiring us to make changes that in some circumstances we think we can go a little bit longer without having to make some of the changes, and they disagree. But that being said, we've got upstream and downstream passage of fish and American eel that needs to be improved at both locations, which, based on current day funds, can cost upwards of $2 to $3 million at each facility. So we're hopeful that we've done the negotiating that we needed to do with the fish agencies to not necessarily negotiate out what needs to be done, because they are quite adamant and implementing similar programs throughout the country with other hydro facilities. But we've got them to allow us to sort of stretch things out, if you will. So we've been able to sort of get the timing set so that we're not in here asking you for a big giant lump sum, that we can come in and do this sort of bit by bit. So the replacement of the turbine at Jackson was really, albeit not the first bond that we had requested a bond to actually make the purchase of one of the facilities, but that $6.2 million was simply for the replacement of the turbine and some of the work that was done at Mine Falls. Back in 2020, one of the turbines at Mine Falls went through a complete overhaul to the tune of about $500,000. But the idea was, once we got that turbine back up and running, that it would have a little bit of extra life that would last us, so that we could time any of the replacement of this equipment so that it wasn't all coming down all at once.
And then to that end, just to close our formal presentation, I suppose, I did want to comment quickly on some of the financials behind this request. If I were sitting in your seats, I would be wondering, we're hearing a lot about expenses related to these facilities, and certainly there is a renewable energy benefit, but how are the facilities actually operating from a revenue versus expenses perspective? And I wanted to just give a sample of that before opening up to questions, Mr. Chair. One of the challenges here that I should point out before I get into these numbers is that we've only had these facilities online in our ownership for between 7 years and 5 years, so our data are limited. Obviously, we're looking at averages, but generally our operating expenses, and that's really the management of these two facilities, is about $430,000 annually. And I want to point out that there are really two components to that cost. One is that we have a fixed cost with our contractor, and the other is that when we collect more revenue, our contractor actually does better. So the more volume that we're collecting from revenue, the more that they're receiving as well, and so that's variable year to year. It's not entirely a fixed cost. We currently have 3 bonds in place for the facilities, and in total, that's paying about $800,000 a year in debt service. That number is very variable from year to year. We have not actually paid $800,000 a year to my knowledge to date, but we expect that that would be really the stable value for at least the 5 to 6 year period based on the bond that we're proposing this evening. The average revenue collected from Mine Falls, based on a 5-year sample, is about $980,000 to $1 million. And then from Jackson, which is obviously the 1 megawatt turbine, that's about $480,000. So about half the revenue being collected there. So you can see we come in at the positive. The facility is operating in the black. And I want to point out as well that since the 2017 acquisition, the most recent acquisition of the facility, we've actually net revenue at about $1.6 million. And so these facilities are running profitably. And although we are intending to or requesting additional debt service to pay for improvements to continue their operation, generally, not only are we getting this incredible renewable energy benefit and really fulfilling an element of our renewable energy portfolio, we're also collecting monies that are then returned back to the general fund, inevitably to benefit the national taxpayer as well as we continue to run these as profitably and efficiently as possible. Mr. Chair, with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, or Deborah, I'd be happy to take questions.
Before we start, when we get into budget, I'd ask that if you two of you could stay, because I'm going to ask for clarifying questions right now, mostly for the public listening. And more, if there are any more detailed questions, we'll ask them during budget. I have a couple things clarifying my mind. So the one thing I just want to make sure is that if for any reason we don't spend all the money from the bond, we just won't sell the rest of that bond, correct?
Great question. We do fully anticipate to spend all of the money that's requested as part of the bond. I may have underemphasized it, but the permitting and design work that will be necessary for some of the Mine Falls relicensing work will certainly take up and expend the full amount of the bond. We do not intend to underexpend the amount of bonding.
So I've always been one that's possession's 9/10 of the law. So is there an issue holding up the shipment of other than this bond, the turbine to us, and does the warranty start when it arrives here, or is the warranty already started?
The warranty has already started, so we're actually paying for an extension of the warranty. And the problem with moving the turbine here is actually quite practical. And it's that we had a very difficult time finding a facility that could actually house this piece of equipment. I'm going to pass it to Deb in a second to confirm the measurements, but this is a massive piece of equipment that needs to be stored in a climate-controlled space and actually has to undergo regular maintenance to ensure that it's operating, or it can operate at full capacity when it arrives here. But Deb, could you fill in a little more detail there that I may have missed?
Yeah, the crate that the turbine comes in is apparently, I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but it's 17 feet by 17 feet by 16 feet. Yeah, I'm still, the logistics on that, getting that through downtown Nashua, I have no idea how that's going to happen, but I'll let you know when it starts coming. We can have a parade or something. It seems, yeah, it seems remarkable. But we did have trouble trying to find a local storage location, number one, that would fit something of that nature in a climate-controlled area. And we were also able to get the manufacturer to store it there at their facility, and they're the ones who are doing the maintenance checks to make sure that everything is, that the temperatures are properly controlled, that the turbine and the bearings that are in it are being, are being used so that things aren't totally rusting out and freezing up. So I feel a little bit better knowing that the professionals are taking care of it while it's still sitting and waiting to be shipped. And actually, technically, from the calls that I had made, it was cheaper to actually have them store it than to have it stored here.
Other than the fact that it's someplace that we can't get a hold of it easily. One other question I have is just that the cost of electricity is increasing Do we anticipate that we will generate additional revenue because of the increase in electricity when we sell the power to the grid?
Yes.
Okay, good, cool. Any other clarifying questions? I see Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that the turbine is being well taken care of. My question was around the permitting. You said that you were having issues with that. Is that specifically what's holding us up from shipping it? And if so, when are we gonna get the permit?
If you can answer that second question, please do let us know. But no, the receipt of the permit is actually not holding up the shipping of the turbine. It's simply this lack of physical location to store it. We're hoping to time it such that once we have notification that the permit will be approved, we will then initiate the shipping of the turbine across the ocean, have it delivered, and then have it trucked to the facility itself for installation, hopefully during the summer months where climate control is not as necessary. So it's not the permit itself that's actually holding it up. As far as receipt of the permit, we simply do not know. We're doing everything we can, including regular check-ins with our consultants who have federal relationships and the federal reviewers themselves. Based on recent estimates, we're fairly confident that we'll have a permit for installation in summer of this year. But one of the critical things that this potential authorization gets us is the ability to secure a qualified contractor to actually perform the work. One of the challenges is that there aren't a lot of firms operating in this space, and that is turbine installation. And so within the New England area, it was really difficult for us to find a qualified contractor, and more importantly, to secure them based on other comparable projects that are being done in the region. And so, although we may not know the certainty of when the permit will be approved, this authorization gives us the ability to enter into a contract with a contractor, regardless of when that approval actually comes through.
If I could follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you. So does this bond account for a certain number of months sitting in that lovely facility where they're taking care of our very expensive turbine? And what happens if we go over that?
Great question. I'd be happy to answer that. I wouldn't be happy to answer it. I can't answer it. It's a concern that we have. I'll be frank. One of the concerns that I have, and I think this board would have, and certainly the mayor has had, is in the event that this permit is delayed for another 2 years, which we do not think is likely. I want to be clear about that. But in the event that happens, are we only going to see compounding costs based on what we're bringing before you this evening? I can't tell you that's not the case, but I can tell you we have a fairly high degree of confidence that this project will be executed in 2023, but we are at the will of the federal government. And so I cannot commit to you this evening that this money will be adequate in the event that the project is extended another 12-month period, but we are confident that that will not be the case.
Any other questions? Clarifying questions? Seeing none? All right, I will now open up R-22-074 testimony in favor. Seeing none, I will now open up for testimony in opposition. Seeing none, once more, I'll open it up for testimony in favor. Seeing none, once again, testimony in opposition. Seeing none, I'll now declare the public hearing on resolution R-22-074 closed at 7:23 p.m. And we might as well go right into budget, but anybody here that's not on budget that wants to take advantage can leave.
Oh, we do need to adjourn.
Yes,
we need to
Alderman
adjourn?
Kelly, what?
Do we need to adjourn the public hearing first?
I just did.
Oh, I thought we had to formally call for adjournment.
No, I said, I closed the public hearing. Oh, the adjournment.
Yeah, I wrote down 7:23.
Move to
but,
adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
The public hearing is closed, the meeting has to close. This is to close the meeting. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I did make the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 724. And give it a minute, and then we'll go right into budget. Okay, I'd like to call a budget committee to order on Monday, November 28th, 2022 at 7:25 PM in the Aldermanic Chamber. We'll start the meeting with a roll call attendance. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman at Large Larry Wilshire is absent. Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman Ernest Jettie.
Here.
Alderman June Karen.
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present. And our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present. Okay, we have a quorum. And also with us this evening is Alderman at Large Ben Clements, Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Manager, and Director Matt Sullivan. Anyone else? And Miss Alderman Tebow. All right. I'll call for any public comment.
Good evening. Mary Lou Blaisdell, 32 Webster Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. And I'm here tonight to talk about the proposal for $100,000 to go to the Downtown Improvement Committee. I would like to strongly ask for your support for this. The Downtown Improvement Committee, as you know, we've been funded from line item 166 from the general fund. Anything over $728,000 came back to our committee. And in the last few years, with the barriers, with COVID, and with various other things, we received a flat $100,000, and we would like the support of that Alderman Clements has put before you. I feel that our committee is extremely diligent in how we use our money. We talk about any expenditure at length among all of us in our committee. We have used our money for downtown. We have paid for pay and displays. The lights that you see out there right now for the holidays and the banners have all been paid for from the Downtown Improvement Committee. We've paid for extra street cleaning during the summer months. We paid for interns. We helped paint the barriers. Over the years, we've supported GAD with the stroll and their farmers market. So every penny that we have received, we have put back into downtown in some form, and we would continue to do that. So I would ask for your support in that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Rich Lannon, 11 McGrath Road in Pelham, with offices here in Nashua. As Mary Lou pretty much repeat what she said, but I'm on the Downtown Improvement Committee as well, but as a property owner of a couple commercial buildings on Main Street, and what I've seen the Downtown Improvement Committee do all the years, that, again, Mary Lou just went through some of the lists, and there's probably more than that. I think it's money well spent, and, you know, because of all the reasons, like you said, with COVID and, you know, the barriers, different changes, which, you know, I personally support. It's just, you know, I know it flat funded the $100,000, so we at least knew what our budget would be. So I fully support. Unfortunately, where we did not have the opportunity for an official vote from the Downtown Improvement Committee, but I did talk to both Michael Buckley, who is on the committee, but also, as you know, owns a couple of restaurants on Main Street today, and he said that I am welcome to give you his support as well, that he thinks is a good idea for downtown, as well as Philip Sconsis, who is obviously a longtime business owner. Again, he is on the Downtown Improvement Committee, but also fully supports. You know, he made a suggestion that hopefully we look at this again maybe 2 or 3 years from now, and just to see where it's at. We're hoping when down with the Performing Arts Center, as you know, that was officially announced today. Hopefully most of you folks got my email today. But it's still only be 3/4 of a year, so come 2024, when they're open for a full entire year, Who knows, at some point in time, parking rates could potentially go up. So obviously, we would like to look at this and go back to the old way at some point. But I think for this year, maybe for the next couple of years, I think this is a good way to, to support the Downtown Improvement Committee, to support the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Seeing none. Communications,
There are none.
unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions,
Before us this evening is R-22-074, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $1,500,000 for turbine work and various repairs and improvements to the Jackson Mills and Mine Falls hydroelectric facilities. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
okay, the recommendation is for recommend final passage to the full board. Discussion? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions around this resolution, if I may. The first is to Director Sullivan. Great presentation tonight. My big question is, why do we own these? Is it to generate electricity or is it to generate revenue?
Yes, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Sullivan. I would argue it's actually for both purposes. I can't speak to the conversations around the original intent when the facilities were purchased, but my understanding is that it was really to enhance the city's renewable energy portfolio. However, in taking on the facilities and making these investments and seeing the revenue that has come in, we realized them to in fact be a revenue generator. I do not believe they were purchased with the sole intent of being a revenue generator. However, I think there were really broader purposes in mind when they were acquired.
Okay. During your presentation tonight, you mentioned there's a turbine in the Czech Republic that we own. Does the passage of this bond affect that coming to the States in any way?
Mr. Chair. The answer is both yes and no. Perhaps that will be the theme to my answers to the questions this evening. The reality is that we do currently have adequate funding to ship that turbine to this location. There are complications, obviously, with the storage and the timing of the project that do not prohibit us from doing that, but have led us to the conclusion that that's not in the best interest of the project. However, what we do recognize is that we have a shortfall in costs in other components of the project. And so indirectly, yes, it will leave us with a shortfall in some component of the project, but that could be a larger shortfall in the construction component, or it could be a shortfall in the storage component or the warranty component. We have really shortfalls, I would argue, in several pieces that need to be addressed.
Just a little amplification, which I think Deb knows, but years ago when we started having all the maintenance problems with the current generator, the city decided to, for lower cost of maintenance over the years and the fact that this one could fail at any time and is impossible to repair, we allocated the money via bond to have a new generator designed and built to fill the requirements of our generator. It's not a standard generator that you can buy off the shelf. It had to be completely designed to fit in the space, generate the electricity that we wanted it to generate. And we now own it, but it's sitting in the Czech Republic. So, and I think it was, I forget how much it cost, but it was a pretty substantial amount of money. And I think that, it would be crazy for us not to get it here. Continue.
More questions. Thank you very much. In your presentation, you mentioned that these two facilities together generate 15,000 megawatts of power, which powers 2,000 homes. With these two turbines, is it capable to generate more power, thus generate more revenue?
Mr. Chair, I may ask Ms. Chisholm to comment a bit more on the energy side of things. That would be appropriate.
Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Manager. The current setup with the 3 turbines that we have generating power, they're pretty much generating the max capacity that they can. We don't necessarily hold back. We operate as much as we can. It really is dependent on the water flow. So when we're in a drought situation like this, we don't generate as much power. Last year, when we had a rainy day every day for the month of July, we had some really prolific generation last year. So it sort of comes and goes. You know, as I continue to look forward with, okay, we're replacing one of the turbines at Jackson with the same, it's still going to be a 1 megawatt turbine. When we go to replace the turbines at Mine Falls, can we afford to put in something larger? Maybe. And I think that is a design study that needs to happen before we just go ahead and replace with the same. It's a possibility.
Okay.
Director Sullivan?
I would just add that one of the things that could be done more efficiently is we have had downtime due to equipment failures and other lifespan issues with the existing turbine at the Jackson Falls facility. You may remember a few months ago I came as part of the escrow process for a contribution to the Hydroelectric Trust Fund, which is really our emergency capital reserve fund if something breaks. That's a substantial cost. Those issues not only, again, impact us from having to pay for the repairs, but they also make it so that we lose money that could be potential revenue. And so as we put a new turbine in place that is more reliable, has less issues, that is a gained efficiency in revenue that we can't necessarily project, of course, but we have not had a new turbine in place in our ownership of the facility, and that might be an additional generator.
Okay.
One additional thing is, when we designed this generator, it was designed so that different modules could be replaced without taking the whole generator apart, and that we also bought spare parts to have here so it could be immediately repaired. In the past, when it went down, it was a year and a half or more to get it repaired. That won't happen anymore with the new one, hopefully.
2 more questions,
Sure.
if I may. Thank you. You had mentioned in your presentation that I'm looking at now that our operating expenses are at $430,000 annually. I looked at the fiscal year 23 budget today online, and it was forecasted that was going to be about 600,000. So what is it, 400 or is it 6? Because because the reason I ask is because the spread between what we spend and what we get back it's going to be either here or here.
Director Sullivan?
Yeah, excellent question. We are obviously more conservative in our expense budget numbers, and we are conservative in our revenue numbers, actually, that we included in the fiscal year budget as well. Part of the circumstances around this year's budget is that we were actually in the midst and are currently in the midst, and you'll hear more about this in the coming weeks, of negotiating a new contract with Essex Power, who is our provider, our maintenance entity, our operating entity. We were not certain of what the terms of that contract might be. It was pre the proposal coming to us, and so we were very conservative in the number that we included in the budget. And so perhaps this is another yes and no answer from me. We anticipate that it will be somewhere in the middle. I will say that generally the contract has been around, I would say, right on the nose of $400,000 over the past 4-year period, which is really the most reliable sample period of time. We are entering into a new structure of the contract, and so there will possibly be a slight increase. But again, it's really dependent upon how much revenue that the city will be collecting. There is a revenue component to it. But we're pretty confident it will be somewhere between those 2 numbers, but unlikely to be at the $600,000 number.
Okay. I just have a question for CFO Griffin, if I may. I saw him in the audience.
He's here with his very able assistant. Mr. Griffin, welcome.
Good evening. John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector.
My question is around the length of the bond. I was just curious why we would bond $1 million over 30 years as opposed to maybe 10. I mean, I would see a larger project, you know, we bonded 16 million, 5 million over however many years, but I just thought maybe a smaller amount would be 10 years as opposed to 30. Why the difference?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we actually discussed that internally with a few of us and thought that matching the $1.5 million or whatever the number was going to be to what was going to be useful, as Director Sullivan indicated, was a good match. I say that not only for this particular bonding initiative, but also for the others that have been discussed with the other needs of the city. So you know, the options were take cash, buy it with cash. So you're spending cash for something that's gonna last for 30 years plus. So that was kind of the consistency that we were looking for. And when we package this, probably next August, with the other bonding requirements, it will match pretty nicely in that package that we can sell effectively to the market.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
Good for now, yeah, thanks.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I totally support this. One of the first times I think I ever met you, Ms. Chisholm, when I was working on the net metering for these particular facilities. Let me tell the rest of the board, these are gems. I use the term a lot. But we have 2 dams that a lot of municipalities don't have any. So like everything else that you have that's mechanical, there's going to be failures and everything. And we may choose maybe not to make the investment. But I think we can see at what loss, you know, of what we get. I mean, that's quite a substantial amount. What did you say? 2,000 homes could, receive power. So that's money that goes back into the grid system. We did have the discussion with Eversource at the time, and they determined the net metering, and I thought we were going to lose that one, but they allowed it because of the uniqueness of the situation. So based on that, I think this is the best bang for the buck. They are already in existence, and this is the best thing for the taxpayers, so I'm going to totally support this.
Alderman Jenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so, so I too am in favor of any way that we can generate, electricity without burning something. I'm in favor of. But I'm a little surprised. Maybe I wasn't paying attention before to learn that that we designed and had built and evidently are paying for a turbine that we haven't yet received a permit for. So, what is the possibility that we won't get a permit, and we're sitting on this turbine which cost how much? We've already spent how much on this project?
Director Sullivan.
I do not believe it's possible that we will not receive a permit. It's very much a question of timing. To Alderwoman Kelly's question, we hope that timing is next summer. But we are very positive we will receive a permit. We received no negative indication, to my knowledge, from the federal reviewers of any deficiencies within the permit application. It simply is a matter of volume and the number of reviewers actually available to look at permits of this type across the nation, but nothing related to the actual quality of our application or the facility itself or the turbine itself. So we believe and are very confident that we will receive a permit.
With the government's total emphasis on renewable energy, it'd be kind of crazy if they didn't allow us the permit.
Well, the current government, who knows?
We got a ways to go yet.
So I have another question.
Sure,
So-
Alderman Jenny.
This, when I look at your numbers, when I add up the 980 $400,000 for Mine Falls and the $480,000 for Jackson Falls, I come out with $1,460,000. And when I look at the expenses of, if I read that correctly, $430,000 annually for operating expenses and $800,000 for debt service, I come out with, $1,230,000. So the margin there is only a couple of $100,000, right? So,
Well, Director Sullivan?
Yes, that is correct. And to Alderman Sullivan's questioning earlier, we recognize it's a very small margin. But I do want to return to the idea that these were not purchased exclusively as an opportunity to generate revenue for the city. And so it is possible if the rain gods, if that's what you believe in, are not generous to us in a year, we may operate a year at a loss with these facilities. However, we've had some tremendous years, very limited outages, very strong rainfall, very strong snowmelt, where we've operated far and above beyond the revenues that I've even indicated here. And so I actually had a very detailed conversation with Deb today about even presenting these numbers because they're simply so different from year to year and the limited sample size that we have. And so, Alderman Jetty, I mean only to say that we will potentially have some years where we operate at a loss just on the nature of these facilities. But the years where we outperform, we've done very, very well in collecting revenue above and beyond. And I'm confident that we can cover this gap moving forward.
okay. And I have
Another question?
And the way this is gonna work, I mean, you talked about generating enough power to take care of 2,000 homes. We're not gonna do that ourselves, right? We're just gonna sell this to Eversource and then they distribute it to the homes and,
As of today, our intent is to maintain the existing arrangements we have, which involve, yes, selling back to the grid, yes.
okay. And one last one.
Unless you'd like to be hooked up directly, we can make that happen. No, our intent is to maintain the existing arrangements.
Yeah, no, my plan is to hook up to my wife's car.
Okay.
And, that should, so, and my last question is, in spite of how much we've spent on this project already, this 1.5, I mean, that money's already been spent or borrowed, or that's already in the works, right? This 1.5 we're talking about tonight is new money, anticipating when we get the turbine and get the permit, this is the cost of actually installing it, is that?
That is correct, and other associated expenses with getting the turbine delivered to the site, yes. And I do want to point out again, and we were quite deliberate about this in the language, that it is a critical component of this funding to allow us to get a head start on the Mine Falls process as well. We would really like to begin that without returning back for additional authorization, because design time and permitting time spent now, as we're learning through this very painful process with the federal government, is money well spent that can put us in a very competitive position, or not competitive position, but an advantageous position as we go into the next permitting process with the feds. So it really is simply to address a deficiency in the Jackson project, but there are benefits to the Mine Falls facility as well.
Well,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, I think you've had a question, right? So, Alderman Tebow?
Not during the budget meeting, but.
Oh, you
I'm also
didn't
on
have a
the
question?
committee.
Go ahead. Alderman.
Thank you.
Alderman McKellen.
Thank you. So you answered some of my questions in the public hearing. I wanted to just dig in quickly about, I know you can't project revenue, but I wanted to talk a little bit about net metering and how that's helped us, and if there's any capacity to get more revenue, or if we're at max there. So that's question one.
Ms. Chisholm? Or,
Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Manager. I'm kind of wishing I had Doria sitting next to me right now to talk about net metering.
I don't-
Great
She is the expert
That's a really
on
good
net
question.
metering. We do net meter Jackson. And one of the things that, when we originally had the turbine designed, and Alderman O'Brien, State Rep O'Brien, was up pushing that legislation forward to increase the size of the turbines that you could net meter, we found that we might be able to squeak a little bit more power out of that 1 megawatt turbine, hopefully. That's what we're shooting for anyways. We can net meter the Mine Falls facility. It's a 3 megawatt facility. We would have the ability now to do that net metering. However, we are stuck in a contract right now until 2024. And we are paying out at a very low rate. So we're hopeful that once that contract is up, we will be able to net meter that, and our revenues, a back of the envelope calculation reveals a considerable increase in revenue once we can actually net meter Mine Falls. We have not actually gone through that whole process to determine if that's our best bet, but that is something that we are thinking about.
Okay, great. And if I could follow up?
Follow-up question?
My follow-up question is around the new turbine. I know we talked about it at length. You had graphs, is great. I'm assuming it's new, so it'll be more efficient. So will we also make more revenue because it's a better system than what we currently have?
Well, I believe that just the fact that we'll have it's not just a new turbine, it's a new turbine, it's a new generator, it's a new control system. And having that being brand new means much less maintenance, much less downtime, as Matt alluded to earlier. We're not going to have the amount of downtime with that facility once it's brand new. So fingers crossed that we can get that thing installed next year and have a much more efficient unit generating, hopefully, continuous power and not having to shut it down because there's a vibration noise that we're hearing. Shut it down because, we've got a stick in the way. There are several reasons why we might have to have it shut down for any given amount of time, and we're hopeful that that'll be done once we install the new one.
If I could follow up one more time.
Sure.
I do remember when you came here before, it was offline for quite a bit. And so this is the hopefulness is that offline component will go away, correct?
Correct. Right before we started the project, the turbine at Jackson went down, and we spent probably $50,000 to put a big old Band-Aid on that thing, and it's still working now as we speak. So that was money well spent. But as you know, once the new turbine installation starts happening, that means we're at a loss for that revenue as well. So it kind of is it kind of hits you twice. You have to pay to have that new turbine put in, and while you're putting it in, you're losing revenue. But I think we'll catch up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on this committee, but I saw a lot of some emails, some social media, directly and indirectly, asking about this whole thing tonight, I guess. I suppose once you're called dumb enough that you become an experienced alderman, so I'm going to ask a dumb question. And this is going to be through you to CEO or CFO Griffin. So we're bonding again, and the questions from our constituents out there is, we keep bonding, the tax rate's going up, we keep bonding, tax rate's going up because of the bonding. Every time we bond something, the tax rate's going to go up. Can you explain to us and the public how this will impact the tax rate, and how are we bonding too much? Is this an additional bonding that we shouldn't be doing? Should we be finding another revenue source? I guess that's enough of a question.
Yes.
Sure.
Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. This project, as shown by my colleagues here, is a very worthwhile project for a couple of reasons. One, it's profitable, which is an amazing thing 5 years out, 7 years out of our purchases. I was here back in 17 and 19 and the bonding. And there were some folks that said, let's buy them and sell them. But with the hard work of the team that's worked on this, the waterways managers and the community development directors and everybody in between, this particular one is I was pleased to attend tonight to support the team. So the 1.5 million seems to me, without investing in this and without spreading the costs over the life of the investment, it's on average a $92,000 a year expense. A little bit more in the first years, but over time, 92,000. So for this particular item, it makes a lot of sense to bond and continue with the hope of getting non-burning, non-fossil fuel generating assets for the city. And that's a lot, I was here, like I mentioned, there's a lot to do with buying these. 40-year leases were running out. I think that's what Ms. Chisholm is talking about with that smaller amount. I think it's 5 cents. We're selling power for 5 cents. So as you can tell, if things go the way they're going, that number's gonna be dramatically increased. As far as the other bonds, we've done a lot of public transparency about bonding, and bonding is a strategy used by municipalities, cities, and towns to invest in their community, to be able to provide the services and other things that the citizens and businesses want to have us invest in. We also mentioned that there was a period of time where the debt service was hovering around 16 million, which with a $300 million operating budget, that's not a large number. Some of the municipalities are around 10%, so not that I'm advocating it, but there's room there to grow, not only with that optic, but also we're under the targets that are set by the state with regard to investments in school property and city property. So it's a mechanism to spread the costs of investments over the life of those investments. I read the same comments, and everybody has good opinions, but in this particular case, I would not recommend not investing and getting that turbine back on United States soil. There's going to be other bonding events coming up. I mean, we have to sell the bond. This will not be sold until next August at the earliest. And we have to sell bonds, as I mentioned to Alderman Sullivan, we have to package them and sell the remaining bonding of the middle school projects and other projects that you've approved. So hopefully that, it's a mechanism to spread the cost of the investments that are bondable. Bond counsel has to review each and every project. It has to be attested to. It has to be, we have to keep every single receipt that goes into the bonding upon IRS audit. So we haven't had one recently, but the one we had was exemplary. So we're in good shape with keeping our records. So with that, hopefully that's responsive to your question. Thank you.
Just one follow-up comment.
Follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I support this, and I don't have a vote on this committee, but it's like Alderman O'Brien said, these are two assets to the city. It's important. Like you say, it generates revenue. I'm all for it, so I just wanted to put that concern out there because we're going to hear it every time we have to bond something. We're going to hear that, and I want to make sure it's clear that it's not as dire as people think when we're doing this. There's a reason why we're doing it, and it's important to keep this infrastructure in the city going. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
To that note, I would like to make a motion to table this resolution. And I'd like a moment to speak to it, please.
Can't speak to a table.
Can't?
Can't speak to a table. Motion to table.
No, you can't speak to it. You can make a motion,
And we can't discuss it?
but nope. You want to make the motion?
I do.
Motion is to table. Can you call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The motion to table. Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
No.
Alderman Ernest Jettie.
No.
Alderman June Karen.
No.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien Sr. votes no. Chairman Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, just want to mention one other thing. There was a great article not too long ago in the Municipal Association's magazine that comes out that I hope everybody gets a chance to read. There are always important things. Cities and towns cannot afford not to bond things. If they do, their credit rating is shot, and we would certainly go from one of the best-run cities to one of the worst if we didn't cover things that we need to do with some level of funding, including bonding. So, in this instance, we're bonding something that's a revenue back to the city, and it's generating energy without burning fossil fuels and contaminating the atmosphere. So I don't see a downside. And we've already invested in designing and building this turbine, which fits in a unique position in a unique building. And I think that we need to commit to following through on this. Alderman Sullivan?
If I may, the reason that I made that motion is because it seems that since the beginning of the fiscal year, we've been bonding a lot, and we have. We've bonded close to $33 million, and when you add up all of the payments, that's $2.4 million. That's without the passage of this. CFO Griffin spoke to other bonding projects. The reason that I wanted to table it was not because I'm not in favor of this. I'm in favor of it. I think it's a worthy project, and I think it falls in line with my values of why you should bond money, which is to borrow money that either produce revenue or appreciate in value. However, with all of the bonds that have come online, they seem to come quick through this this committee, and then we do it, and then we look at the merits of the project, and we vote yea or nay. I voted for all these, and they're all worthy projects: police vehicle, landfill, sewer, school safety, school renovations, and a fire truck. But to CFO Griffin's point, you had mentioned that we have other projects, and we weren't going to sell these bonds until August anyway. So I was asking that we table it so we could look at the bigger picture to see what else is coming down the line, so we can then evaluate it and look at it in towards the bigger picture. And that's why I wanted to table it, just to hit the pause button, since we weren't going to sell the bonds right away anyway. We do have time. It's December, basically, and we weren't going to sell these until August, to allow us to take a look at other projects, maybe over the next, I don't know, 12 months, to see what else is coming online, so we don't have to make decisions just based on a project by project, but we can look at the bigger picture of what it is we need to bond as a city. Because I agree with you. I think bonding money it's a necessary thing, because you don't always have cash to do these things, and you need to borrow it. And if your credit rating allows and you have the revenue coming in that you can make the payments, then great, you do it. But I just want to make sure that we're looking at the big piece. I was surprised at how much we've bonded. I knew that we were passing bonds a lot. I didn't know it was that many, and I didn't realize that when you look at the payments, that it's $2.5 million on top of that, and then you add the 92 on top of that. So now it's starting to get up there, and that was the reason for why I wanted to. I just did it backwards. I probably should have said that and then made my motion.
You know,
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just one point to add to Alderman Sullivan's thoughts. In speaking with Director Sullivan and Ms. Chisholm, the authorization that you would provide is really, it doesn't matter when we sell. They need to be confident when they're talking to that company that they're working with that's going to basically be retained to do the work. That could not wait till next August when we sell, so there's a difference. So the authority you provide allows us to spend and commit to purchase orders. So that's a little bit different, Alderman Sullivan, than some of the other more long-lived bonding events that we've done. This is more of an immediate need.
So the city can't commit any funds to anybody unless we pass the bond authorization. When they sell the bonds is only when the city needs to have the money to pay back the bonds. A lot of times, the bills come in, they get paid out of cash until the bonds are sold. So the two aren't as related as directly as that. But in order for them to get going and commit the city's funds to this project, we have to pass the bond.
I understand.
Oh, yes?
To my point about the bigger picture, is it possible to get a 12-month view, to sit with city departments, to sit with whomever, to get a 12-month view on bonds so we can, you know, we got this resolution last Tuesday, and I asked some follow-up questions to Director Sullivan, and he responded, he was great. But I just kind of want to look at, see if that's possible to do, so we can look at the bigger picture, so as these come along, we can speak to that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Griffin.
That was specifically what we tried to show on May 5th of 2022. And during certain times when I've been asked questions from you folks, the painting is never done. It's the day that, and this week, you know, my great colleague and friend Dave Fredette, he'd say, how many bond plans do we want to do? And he'd like to do one only. And then if things come in, we explain how this fits in. So for example, Mr. Director Sullivan and I, we said, this fits into the 3 million at the bottom. It's not more than 3 million, it's 1.5 million of that 3 million. So we do have a good handle of things. But I've also witnessed infrastructure committee, you need some help over at the garages. I watched in earnest at the library project that seemed to be all-encompassing, you know, between 20 and 30 million. This was not on the budget, specifically the budget plan, as I indicated, and a few of those school projects weren't. Needs to adapt, but the last thing we want to do is have a monthly update of a bond plan. But we will commit to a new plan before the budget. I would just like to say, smaller towns, maybe smaller cities, they come in for the approval of bonds once a year. They don't come in during the year. But what you have to do there is a whole heck of a lot of planning and know what you want to present and when. Because they have town meetings, they don't meet regularly. They have a town meeting in the spring and then a special town meeting to clean up the books in the fall. So we actually have the luxury of having you folks here twice a month for the most part. We can bring in resolutions as we need them, but we will get to the point where we're gonna have to put these in. And then we are able to go that 6-year road, as Alderman Clemens spoke about, to find out what the impact is. And it is climbing, there's no question. And that was the purpose of the May 5th meeting, to understand bonding, why we do it, and what's the magnitude that we're experiencing. But to tie that up more tighter, we're gonna grow the debt service between $1 million and $1.5 million a year of things we already bought and invested in. If we paid cash for those things, we never would, you know, if there was like, oh, why don't we use like unspent monies, you can't come up with enough. There was something out there today, I'll speak to it. We have unfunded positions in this year's budget. Can we analyze that, take that money and buy this turbine? But I just explained that turbine, hopefully for the last 30 years plus. So, and we don't do it in intra-year. As you folks know, we close the books, put money into unassigned fund balance, put the remainder into assigned fund balance. It's hard to do in the period of time we're looking at. And what would happen is we would come to you folks to take all those monies out of those departments and put it somewhere. And then you have to ask yourself, is it a timing issue? Where you're gonna get police department, for example, are we gonna take, 10 officers' salaries and move it into some fund that can pay for this stuff? And then they come to us and say, well, we're in the process of hiring them. So it's complicated. But I wanted to get that to you folks as well, because you saw some of that, those questions, and they're good questions. But thank you for letting me
Yep.
articulate.
Alderman Clements?
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, I just want to say I appreciate CFO Griffin. I know that you come before us quite often, and always are available to answer questions. And I know that you presented that bond plan twice, I think, because I think you did it once in May, and then I think you did it again a couple months ago, if memory serves me correctly. And we had a pretty lengthy discussion about what the plan was and how it's going to grow in the future. And you even accounted for unanticipated things in there. So we have a pretty good plan. So I didn't want that to go unsaid.
Yes, Alderwoman Kelly?
So some of what I was going to say was already said, but I think that knowing that this particular contractor is so niche and that the need is going to be there no matter what, and we've already invested millions on this turbine that's sitting in the Czech Republic, this is a prudent thing for us to bond so that we can get this contractor who's going to install it.
Okay. I have one question. Do we know if the company that manufactured it, or it's overseas, has any resident maintenance people in this country that we might hire to do the installation?
I do not believe they have any crews that are capable of doing the installation directly. I don't believe they have maintenance staff per se in the United States. They do have regional representatives that we have worked with to some extent, including one in New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm sure they have preferred contractors for ongoing maintenance, but none that are capable of doing the installation directly, to my knowledge, but I defer to Ms. Chisholm.
Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Manager. I would like to say that when that turbine comes over and is actually ready for the install, the company that we'll be using to quote, do the install, they're the ones that will be doing the site work. They'll be doing, installing a coffer dam to keep water away from the facility. They'll be demolishing the powerhouse. They'll be pulling out the old turbine and getting rid of it. But Mavel, who is the company that manufactured the turbine, they will be sending a representative over to us when we're ready to actually do the installation of the turbine and to start hooking it up. There will be somebody there from the manufacturer who will be helping us with that.
Okay. And again, to Alderman Sullivan, yes, we probably do have to look at reining in some of our bonds. For instance, we wouldn't have done the two schools, Maine, Dunstable, Birch Hill, if it weren't for the fact the government's paying for half of the project. And we can't get that deal to, anytime in the future. We got to get taken now. So we wouldn't have done both those schools. We may not have even done one, but sometimes things come up that it's far beneficial to the city to take advantage of. But yes, we have to look at pushing some things out, perhaps, and stay, physically responsible. So something we can look at.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Where are we?
We need a vote.
All right.
Final.
Let's see. All right, so the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage to the full Board of Aldermen on resolution R-22-074. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, new business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee.
There is one item, 0-22-019. It's been brought to our attention by a non-member of the committee, Alderman Clemens, that he would like to remove 022-019 from the table. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized for a motion on behalf of myself and Alderman Clemens, to remove from the table 022-019.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to move 022-019 from the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So 022-19 is on the table, changing the downtown improvement funding plan. Alderman O'Brien.
I would like to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Motion is to recommend final passage of O 22019. Discussion? Yes, Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Thank you for the committee for hearing this evening. It's been on the table for quite some time now, because there's a couple of things in the works that kind of put this on the table, which the main one was the infamous parking study, right? Which we all know has not yet come out. And part of that study was supposed to be a rate recommendation, I'm gonna put it to you that way, of what to do with meter fees downtown. That has not come to fruition yet, and we're hopeful that it'll be coming maybe around the first of the year, but again, that could be delayed even further. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here, because the original intention of the ordinance was when we had COVID-19 came about, that fiscal year, well, I should say the calendar year of 2020, the parking revenue took a nosedive for a number of reasons. One is we did the barriers, but two, traffic in general downtown, even when the barriers weren't there, when everything was shut down, was just, there was no traffic, right? So there was nobody parking, there was nobody coming down. I mean, it was a ghost town if you went through in April of 2020. So that got a little bit better when the barriers came out that year, and we actually ended up doing okay. I think it was we did, instead of doing 728, or normally we do 828,000, I think we made 700,000 that year. 2021, that calendar year, we knew after going through 2020 that the Downtown Improvement Committee was not going to get any funding because they didn't reach the minimum threshold to get anything. So in 2021, I introduced a resolution which passed, which changed this ordinance temporarily to give the Downtown Improvement Committee $100,000 out of parking revenue. Knowing the fact that we were doing the barriers again, and that the parking revenue likely wasn't going to be at that or above that 728,000 where it normally is. Call it 828. So we went through that calendar year. The Downtown Improvement Committee in budget $100,000 that was passed by this board. 2022. A lot of the funds that were in there were not spent, right? Because we didn't do the holiday stroll. We didn't do a lot of the events because most of 2021, we were still in COVID, right? And people were worried about crowds and things like that. We did some things, but not everything. So there's quite a bit, and also carried over from 2020, there was quite a bit of cash left over. So it was my recommendation, actually, knowing that the parking study was coming out, hopefully, I thought, and we might do something with the rates, that if we took that $100,000 that we were going to give the Downtown Improvement Committee and gave it to GAD, we could reduce the amount and help the taxpayers out a little bit this year. So actually, there was no funding put into the Downtown Improvement Committee this year in this budget. So they're now waiting, so now we're into next budget season. So the question became, what do we do? Because we know that in April, we passed or the end of March, we passed the barriers, and we know that that's now going to be a permanent thing for the next few years, the foreseeable future. So we know that the revenue was decreased, and it's probably gonna be decreased because of that project. We thought, okay, they're gonna adjust, we're gonna get some kind of study that looks at that and adjusts that revenue. That study never came. So we're still waiting for that. So what this proposes to do is to simply take $100,000 of parking revenue, the equivalent in sum of parking revenue, and put it towards the Downtown Improvement Committee for the foreseeable future. Because if we're honest with ourselves, any kind of study that's gonna come out, we're gonna have to debate. The way that the legislation is written is that it takes the previous calendar year of revenue, and it says anything over $728,000 goes to the Downtown Improvement Committee. Well, we're already into December, and we're close to when the free parking starts downtown. So we're not at 728,000. We're below that for this fiscal year. So or this calendar year. So next year, they're not gonna make the threshold again. So we've gotta do something, at least in the short term, to shore that up, especially considering the fact that they didn't get any funding this year. But then that calls into question, well, what do we do in the future years? Well, if by January and February, and I'm hoping that we have that discussion, we still don't have an answer as to what we're gonna do. Now we're eating into the next calendar year when we start calculating the sum of money that goes to the Downtown Improvement Committee. So my thought on this ordinance is this is a stopgap for the next couple of years to give them the funding that they pre-pandemic got pretty much every year on the average. Some years it was 120,000, some years it was 66,000. It all depended on what the traffic was downtown and how much people were parking there. So on average, they got 100,000 pre-pandemic. This just proposes, let's take that amount of money out of the parking meter revenue and dedicate it to them. We can then discuss what we want to do with this ordinance in years ahead when we figure out what the revenue actually is going to be, if we even decide as a Board of Aldermen to raise parking revenue. Because we might decide we don't want to do that. We don't want to mess around with the parking rates. And that's a perfectly, in these times, in these economic times, that might be a reasonable decision, you know? So the thought here is to stabilize the program, to stabilize what we're giving to the Downtown Improvement Committee every year, starting with the next fiscal year, fiscal budget, and then hopefully for the next few years, and we can review this on a case-by-case basis. The last part of this that I'm gonna say is, nothing in here, this is just a commitment that we are making to downtown. It's a commitment that we are making to the businesses and to the people who patronize downtown and put their quarters into the meters, they put their credit cards into the app, and they pay for the improvements and the things that the committee does. So this is our commitment to them. There's nothing that precludes this Board of Aldermen from saying, we're not gonna fund you this year. I hope we wouldn't, because we did that last year. I think it was the right move. I supported doing that. But there is nothing that precludes us from not doing that. But what the ordinance does do is it says, this is our commitment to downtown. And we've done this commitment for the, I believe that the first year was 2013. So I hope that I can get this committee's support and the support of the Board of Aldermen, because again, it's something we've traditionally done. It goes to very good things. We all hopefully enjoyed the stroll this last Saturday, and we enjoy the other things that happen downtown. So I hope I can get your support, and I'm open to any questions or comments.
So basically what you've said is we're gonna continue the support that we've been giving the Downtown Improvement Committee for the last number of years.
You
Other
summed it up.
questions? Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, more a comment, Mr. Chairman, and that's going to be, I'm going to support this because at the very least, like you have said, this follows our tradition of what we have supported in the past. But I would like to speak briefly on the parking study. We were very fortunate to hire this particular company. However, like everything else, several aldermen come up with their own particular concerns involving their own particular ward, which has extenuated the scope of the study. But parking rates have been discussed, overnight parking has been discussed, even structural, and quite unfortunately, the pay scale of what we as a city pay the parking lot attendants. I think you can greet at Walmart for more money than you can with all the grief in the world as a parking lot attendant in the city of Nashua. So therefore, I think this can go through with no problem. It does not handcuff or binds the hands of future aldermanic endeavors if they should see fit. So therefore, have no problem, and it helps out a wonderful organization that I have worked with in my involvement with the Infrastructure Committee. So I'm going to support this, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. So I just want to distill what you said. So before, what we did was we didn't start putting money towards the downtown improvement until we got to $738,001.
28,000, yep.
Thanks. And then we started counting. Basically, what you're doing is, we're gonna start counting right away. And according to what I see here in the fiscal statements, we've collected to date $186,386 in parking funds so far, through October.
Much more than that.
Well, that's through October, so that's probably a month behind.
No, we've, Mr. Chairman, I know we've collected more than that. I'm not sure why the fiscal note says that.
No, this is parking operations through October 31st, 2022. Revenue to date, 186. And I support this, I'm not, I'm just reading what I see here.
Okay.
So, but to the bigger question of the trust funds that we have for downtown improvement, we have a balance in there of about just under 150,000. Where do those go? What do we do with those? I mean, is that kind of in case of emergency? What happens there?
You have to see who the spending authority is.
I can answer that.
You want to answer that question? Because Alderman Jettie is next.
Yeah, I can answer as far as the expending agent and as far as the Downtown Improvement Committee Trust Fund goes, the expending agent is the mayor with the Economic Development Director. And the committee has an advisory role over that. So anything that is spent out of there should go to the committee. They make a recommendation. Sometimes requests come in from like GAD, for example. Sometimes requests come in from the city itself. Sometimes they come directly from conversations that happen at the committee level. And then they go, and they're brought, if they're under the threshold of the 25,000, they wouldn't go before finance, but if it's over 25,000, they go before finance.
Okay.
And the finance committee has the ultimate authority.
Okay, all set?
Yep.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a lot of questions about the whole idea of how we support our downtown. We've supported the downtown, I think, very generously. since I've become an alderman, there are several, projects that we've undertaken, the biggest of which is the Center for the Arts, which is a $25 million project. Not all of it's just city money, but quite a bit of it is city money. And the Center for the Arts was, well, the Performing Arts Center, but now the Center for the Arts, was supported, for the idea that this would be for lack of a better term, a magnet to attract people to downtown to help support the downtown merchants. And so, that's a lot of money that we're spending to support the downtown merchants. We also, support the Great American Downtown, and I'm not sure how, Great American Downtown. I went to their website and I couldn't figure out. They do have a page where you can they're soliciting contributions, but I don't know if they have a membership. If the downtown merchants are members of Great American Downtown, if they contribute anything, financially to support Great American Downtown, I'm not sure about that, but I have that question. We also, support, we haven't had the stroll for the past couple of years, but this year we did. And I don't know how much we spent on the stroll. And I don't know if the DPW trucks, the snow plows and everything that were blocking the streets, the DPW employees that were there, the police the officers that were there, the firefighters. I don't know if I know we spent, I don't know, 20,000 comes to my mind, but I'm not sure if that's accurate. And I don't know if that's the money that was spent on those things, paying for the police and the fire and the DPW. And I know the stroll, I went to the stroll, my wife and I enjoyed it. It was a great event. But up and down the street, there was Finelli Amusements, and they had this little thing where you roll a ball and it falls into a loop and it advances horses, and the winner of the horse race wins a little doll of some sort. But that, I was watching, and that cost, $5 a play. There was 14 spots, so that's, every time they ran a race, it was $70 going in there. And I don't know if Finelli paid anything to the city or Great American Downtown, to kind of have the opportunity to make that money. There were a lot of, food trucks that were doing a big business. The bars were all packed. Some of the retail stores were open, which was nice to see, and there seemed to be a good amount of traffic. I know that, some sales were made. My wife did buy something. So, I look at it and it looks, and even the merchants who, there were people that were, selling home improvement, windows, roofing services. And I don't know if those people paid to be on Main Street to be able to do that. And it was a great opportunity for, the stores, we went into places that we didn't even know existed. And so it was, I see it's a great benefit to the merchants. And I'm wondering, are the merchants, helping to pay for that, for the benefit that they receive.
Alderman Cheney, I think we'd have to have somebody from GAD come in. It's not the Downtown Improvements Committee. You'd have to have somebody from GAD come in and explain it.
Okay.
So I'm not sure it's related to this particular resolution.
Okay, well, I think it is. I think how we support downtown is part of this. And when this was tabled, I thought that, part of the reason that it was tabled was to have those people here to answer these types of questions.
Well, I think that the Downtown Improvements Committee people here, if you want to ask a question about how they spend this particular money, you can ask them that question.
Okay, so following up on Alderman Sullivan's questions, the last time I looked, in the fiscal year 23 budget book, I noticed that there was close to 250,000 in that fund. Has that been reduced now to 150? So where did that 100,000? Could I ask that question of them? Where did the 100,000 go?
Can somebody from GAD, Downtown Improvements Committee, answer that, or please introduce yourself?
Mary Lou Blaisdell, 32 Webster Street. I chair the Downtown Improvement Committee, and I'm sorry I don't have my printout in front of me of what we have available. We have still some outstanding expenditures we're going to pay for lighting the trees and so forth. But every month in the budget that you will see online, the revenue expenditures from that, you can see exactly what we authorized to be paid. This past year, we've been very conservative with our money because we haven't had anything for the last year. So this past year, the only thing that we have done is we have bought all new holiday banners for downtown. We have paid for all the installation of lighting the trees for Christmas. We paid for an intern and that worked all summer long to talk to diners that were out and about on the benefits of dining downtown and the barriers. We paid extra to DPW to have the streets cleaned from May to September. They clean them once a week. We paid for them to have additional cleaning 2 times a week so that downtown would be a lot cleaner than it is during the summertime. So those are just a few of the things that we have used over the past year to pay for through the money that's been allocated. We're a total separate entity from Great American Downtown. Great American Downtown is an event organization, and what they're tasked with, according to their board of directors, is to put on events that are held downtown. They are to raise their money through sponsorships for the stroll, paying for the Taste of Downtown through selling tickets. You asked if people, the vendors that were out on the streets on Saturday night, in the past, and I'm sure it applied this year, they do pay a fee to be downtown. All of those fees go back into Great American Downtown's budget. That budget has no overlap with the Downtown Improvement Committee at all. It's not even a city budget. It is the Great American Downtown's budget. The city does fund them, and I believe last year you funded them $50,000 into their coffers. And that probably pays for their executive director's salary, I would assume, or help pay for that. But we're 2 entirely different organizations. All of the funds allocated to us, we put back down into the infrastructure of downtown in some way. And we feel that that money is generated by customers who do come downtown, who do eat downtown, shop downtown, people who come to see attorneys and accountants and so forth. And as I said earlier, we try to be extremely diligent in how we do spend that money. And I think we are. I think our committee, I'm very proud of the way our committee discusses expenditures. We never take an expenditure lightly. We have very in-depth conversations on how that money is going to be spent. And I can't speak to Great American Downtown other than what I do know from being a prior board member years ago on that. But I think that downtown needs support, and if we didn't have a downtown improvement committee, if you didn't fund downtown improvement committee, I don't know how you would pay for the holiday lights. It'd have to go into somebody else's budget within the city. I don't know how you pay for the banners. I don't know how you pay for extra street cleaning or interns or consultant. We did consultant studies. We paid for a trolley service years ago. So everything we do is to help and benefit those people who come downtown to use downtown, if that helps.
Thank
Could I
you.
ask a-
Follow-up question?
Yeah, so does the Downtown Improvement Committee, do you solicit money from the merchants themselves?
No. We never have. That wasn't the intent of our committee at all. Our committee was set up in the very beginning when our committee was established. It was established on the basis that anything over $728,000 in line item 166 would come back to the Downtown Improvement Committee. Any monies that were ever solicited from downtown merchants came from GAD. Nothing has ever been solicited, nor will it ever be solicited from our committee.
Okay, could I ask another question?
Follow-up question?
I wasn't an alderman then when this plan was, I wanted to say, I'm trying to think of a better word than scheme. I don't mean it derogatorily, but this plan to, the 728,000 and then the parking, the extra parking revenue. My memory, not having been an alderman at the time, but just a citizen, my memory is that there was an effort by the city to establish a business district that would, where the property owners in the business district would somehow pay extra taxes, extra property taxes. And from those extra property taxes, that money would be used to, to plow the sidewalks, clean the streets, put up lights, take good care of downtown to provide a good environment for the benefit of the merchants, the stores and the restaurants and everything. And that was, that didn't pass, and this came up instead of that.
I think what you're referring to, it was a bid. It wasn't any additional property taxes assessed to the property owners. It was a business development, which would have gone through Great American Downtown. When Great American Downtown, when it first started, it was under another name. There was a bid, and merchants paid X amount of dollars into it if they wanted to be part of Great American Downtown. But many merchants, that was not something they opted to do. And that hasn't been in effect for many years. Downtown, one thing I think people should understand, the city services that we do receive is, yes, we get the streets plowed, the sidewalks plowed, although most of us plow our own sidewalks. We pay for our own trash pickup. We don't have any city services for trash, for recycling or anything. All of that we do pay ourselves. So we do pay for a lot of services that that homeowners or residents in the city receive. We do not receive those. We pay for them ourselves.
Right. Could I follow up? And that's true of all,
It may be.
the merchants on Amherst Street and the merchants on the Daniel Webster Highway, or the merchants on Northeastern Boulevard. They pay for all of those services themselves too, but they don't get what you're getting down here as far as, city support. And that's something I'm trying to justify in my mind. And it's something that people ask me, why.
Well, I think we are the heart of the city. Downtown is the heart of your city. And if you have a downtown that isn't successful or isn't vibrant, then I think the whole pulse of your city suffers. So in my opinion, it is important to keep the pulse of the city strong and to keep your nucleus of your city, your heart of your city strong. And I think we as downtown business owners work hard to do that in our own businesses. And I think that other areas in the city don't have parking meters, and we do downtown. And I think that sets us apart from other businesses and other business districts within the city.
Except other business districts have their own parking lots.
I think it's time to go to somebody else. I'm gonna, Alderman Clemmons.
I just wanted to answer a question that Alderman Jettie had, and that's that he asked originally how this came up, and you are correct, it did come up as a business improvement district was what it was called, and Manchester has one. Basically what it is it's a tax overlay. So you have, you have your taxes that, that everybody pays, and then within the district, there's a sub-tax, it's an overlay tax that everybody pays, and what happens is that tax goes into essentially what we do here with the Downtown Improvement Committee. It goes into a fund that, goes from year to year. They have a committee that expends the funds, things like that. That's how Manchester decided to do it. We down here did it a little bit differently. We decided that rather than tax the property owners downtown, that we would collect the fees from those who visited downtown and who utilized downtown. So in other words, the people that came to downtown, paid a parking meter somewhere, they're the ones who are going to benefit from any improvements that are being had. They're the ones who are going to bear the cost of that. And that's what was decided years ago, as opposed to doing a business overlay or a property tax overlay. So that decision was made years ago, and where the $728,000 comes into it was a compromise, because at the time there was concern that we were going to eat away at the parking meter revenue that was coming in to pay for things like paving, to pay for improvements to sidewalks and things like that. Now in 2011 and 2010, those were legitimate concerns, because we didn't have the paving program as we know it today, where we bond $5 million every year, right? So you would take $300,000 of that money and it would go towards paving a couple of streets or doing this here, that, and the other thing. Now, we have a different program. We have a different way of paying for that. It's not so much a concern of where that's coming from, because it's such an astronomical number. By doing things, in my opinion, by nickel and diming that way, we got so far behind in the paving that now we have to catch up. I think that this still meets the spirit of the ordinance, because the goal here is to get us back to at least $728,000 a year in parking revenue. That is the goal of the parking study. That was the goal, to incorporate how do the barriers affect that, what do we have to do to improve the parking at the garages, how much revenue do we have to raise, knowing that all these factors are here. We don't have the answer to that yet. We don't know what the political will of this body is going to be yet. And if we don't act tonight on this, we're gonna fall 2 years behind in being able to make up any significant money to go towards the Downtown Improvement Committee. So it's not that I don't think that the original commitment of anything over and above $728,000 goes to the Downtown Improvement Committee. I think that's still valid. But I think we're in a situation here where we need to make sure that we're funding the things that we funded in the past since 2013. And that we're making sure that we have a stable fund for the downtown. And this is the best way to do it, in my opinion, because you're still taking the money from the original source.
Are there any other people that have questions? Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. Actually, one of my questions, I didn't realize this was coming off the table this evening, so I apologize that I did not get these questions out in advance, but I wanted to know something similar to Alderman Jettie. I'd love to see a list of projects that have happened. I support this committee. I know they've done a ton of great work downtown. But in even just looking through their minutes, I'm unclear as to what has happened. I know some of it, right? And so that was my question one was I'd like a list of projects that have happened, and where the money has gone so that we just can say to people, this is why we're allocating the money. We're also talking about being fiscally responsible. It's a really hard year. What if the revenues don't come in? People don't come downtown parking. If that's not a typo, then we're basically handing over the entire amount of parking fees that have come in this year to this committee. And I know we have the ability to change that, but I do have concerns about that if we don't know what the revenue is at this moment. I know that COVID changed how parking was happening downtown, and that wasn't the same, and there's been construction and all those things, but it makes me really nervous to just say, yep, we're gonna flatline this budget without knowing some of those answers. And then I also had another question. So I'd love a list of projects. My second question was, in looking at this year, the last set of minutes I see is in May. Has the committee not met since May?
I can answer that. The committee did not meet in July. We have met since May many times. All of those committee minutes are sent to the designated email at City Hall that we are instructed to send it to. And that office at City Hall is responsible for posting them. We are not allowed to post because we are not city employees to the city website. All the minutes from every meeting we have are here at City Hall.
Can I follow up on that?
Follow up?
So that's an interesting point. So if there's not a city person sitting on the board, does that delay? Are there other committees that are coming up against this? Because,
No. The Economic Development Office used to have another person that did take our minutes and posted them. Our committee now takes our minutes. We send them to the city clerk's office, the city clerk's office. From that point, either I assume they post them or they send them to wherever within the City Hall they need to be posted. But every set of minutes from every meeting that we have been submitted to the city.
okay, I'd love to see what the hang up is there because it's really important that people are able to see.
I don't know what the hangup is, but I know they're all here. I have them all time-stamped and I know they're here.
Thank you for doing that.
Alderman Kelly, you have to direct that question to the city clerk's office.
I'm happy to do that. I would love to know where they are, and I'd love to have them before we take a final vote of
Well,
this.
this will go to the full board for,
Unless it gets tabled.
excuse me? Yes. Well, I had Alderman Tebow first, and then.
She's on the committee though. She's on-
You're not in the committee, okay. Alderman Karen?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. A few things, and I don't have any problem with giving them some money. My understanding was that we were supposed to be getting notified that the parking study was coming to the full board sometime in December. And I think, considering everything that's going on, we should be getting some, and I know you're in chair of infrastructure, but I think it's important that we should have been getting something, even if it was just little things. This is what was going on. I know as the alderman for the last 2 years, I have told people within my ward that until that study was done, I wasn't going to try to bring in legislation to give somebody on-street parking, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important that we get that. The second thing is, I'm really disappointed that we're not posting these minutes because it's unfair to that committee to feel that they're doing their job and we're not doing ours and they're getting beat up by the public because of it. I support this. I think that giving a flat amount at this point is a good idea because of everything, and until we have the parking study, I don't know if maybe we should look at it a smaller amount until we see. I don't feel that we want to tie future aldermen's hands, that this is a done deal. And finally, because I put in legislation every year for $25,000 for the National Senior Center to do ongoing things that the city doesn't do, at the end of the year, I make sure that the executive director gives the Board of Aldermen a list of what they spent that $25,000 on. So you have an idea of what that expenditure is. So I agree with Alderman Kelly, maybe in December, if that committee would put together and say, okay, you gave us $100,000, this is what we did, we bought new lights, we did this, we got extra sweeping done, what have you. Although it is the responsibility of the city to plow the streets, because it's not, the businesses don't own the streets, the city does, so we should, nobody should be charging them for doing their due diligence, but, and also as far as GAD, they do charge for people to be at strolls and different things, because I've worked with them forever, on some of these bigger projects, so it's not a freebie. You can't just set up your hot dog stand without paying some kind of fee. It's like going to the fair, you have to pay a fee to be there for the 3 days. But I think those are very important, the parking study, getting some information and finding out why IT isn't getting that information out so that the public is not making statements that they're not doing their job as a committee, because I think they do a very good job, so I have no complaints. Thank you for letting me go.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm not on this committee, but I'm going to make a couple of comments. So I think, I thought of the National Senior Center in the same way I think of GAD. They have an executive director. They don't report directly to the city, where this is more to me like a committee, like a lot of the committees, volunteer committees we have. And so as far as the minutes, if we read our emails, we see that these minutes haven't been coming up that fast because there's been right to knows on them, so.
Alderman Tebow, minutes aren't part of this particular motion.
It came up.
It came up, but it shouldn't have come up because it's not part of this question.
I think you
other
should
than.
Well, yeah,
Alderman Dowd, I
I'm
think you should
sorry.
allow it, because it's the only way we can see where they're spending the money.
Yeah, well, I'll tie that right in.
We have no idea what they're
Not the
doing.
only way, but-
Exactly
All right,
what.
keep it in that context.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly the context I had it in. If we don't have minutes, we don't know what they're spending it on, right? You're the budget head, you should know this stuff, right? So, we all should know. So, I support this 100%, but now you got me going down this different road here with this, we get these right-to-know requests on this, and if we don't see the minutes, how are we supposed to get that back to our constituents and what these committees do? That we give $100,000 to a committee, whether I support it or whether I agree with it or not, I got constituents that probably don't agree with it. I'm sure we do. I'm not a ward that's on Main Street. So I'm sure there's plenty of people in my ward, like Alderman Jetties, that probably question it. And, we let Alderman Jettie talk about GAD for like 20 minutes, and that's not part of this either,
Neither is that.
okay? So that's you can have your committee, I'm done.
Alderman Clemens.
Yeah, thank you. So it's not like the financing or the spending is done in darkness. I'm sure that there is a list that CFO Griffin has that, everything that comes out of that account is spent. It's just a matter of requesting that. I didn't bring it tonight because, to be honest with you, I don't think that it necessarily, it's not a surprise. We know what the Downtown Improvement Committee has done over the last 12 years. They've funded 10 years. They funded things like the banners. They funded things like the lights. They've done the street cleaning. They've done, at times, concerts. Sometimes they've supplemented some of the things that GAD has done. They funded the study for the Performing Arts Center. But it's all public record and it's out there. I did have Donna Graham put this on the agenda last Friday, anticipated to be taken off the table, because I wanted people to have the opportunity to know that it was happening. I wanted the public to know. You know, to me, this is just a law of averages. We generally fund the Downtown Improvement Committee $100,000 every year. What they spend the money on isn't done in secret. It's done in public meetings. I'm sorry that for whatever reason why they're not posted, the minutes aren't posted, I don't know. But the list is available. All of the accounting from that expendable trust fund is available. And you can get that from the CFO at any time. To me, this is a, not so much what is the committee spending the money on? To me, this is, does the committee have the money to spend on anything? And our commitment to the downtown years ago was to make sure that the money was there. And I think that the committee does a very good job funding the money. So the question for me tonight isn't what they're spending the money on, it's do they have the money to spend on anything? And do we want to continue to do that? In my opinion, I think this is a very good and justifiable cause. It's something that it's a commitment that we made years ago when we raised parking meters and charged people $1.50 on Main Street. We said to them, part of the reason that we're charging you $1.50 now is because that money that you put in and that you pay is gonna come right back here. And so to not honor that commitment, well, then we ought to reduce it and call the committee quits. But I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think that puts our downtown in a perilous position. So I would recommend that we move forward with this. If you want the information, I'm sure you can get it from the CFO. And to me, this is about whether or not we're gonna keep our commitment to the people of this city that we made years ago.
Any other questions? Alderman Kelly?
It is a comment. I know that the previous speaker was the person who put this committee together. I think it's a great idea. I think they've done great work. I think that some of the things that were just said are not clear, like saying that we all know where the money is going is not clear. And I'm not trying to nickel and dime anybody, but as someone who's sat on budget and someone who's had on finance, anything that goes through the city over $10,000, we looked at to the cent. So if we ask a committee that we give $100,000 to, what have you done? How hard is it to give us a list of what they've done? I mean, Gad would come and present what they did on their $30,000. What did they do this year for the $30,000 we get? And it was just so that we knew what was going on. So if someone says to me, what is the Downtown Improvement Committee doing? I can give a very clear and honest answer knowing what's going on. And I just feel like the conversation tonight was like actually trying to make that not happen in multiple ways, and I don't understand why.
Right.
Anything?
Briefly respond to that. Like I said, it's a public record.
I'll put in a right.
I mean, I would assume there has to be in the record of expenditures approved by the Finance Committee every.
Correct.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I think to that point is, so the ordinance says this is not binding. So we can say, okay, we're gonna do it, and then June rolls around and we say we're not gonna do it. But to your point, Alderwoman Kelly, if we had an expenditure, and let's just say that we wanted to make an amendment to pare down by $50,000 the amount that we give, it would be good to know a historical record to say, well, this committee has run quite well on $50,000 a year, and $50,000 a year will cover it. So we're just going to appropriate $50,000 for downtown improvement, and then we know what we're talking about. And so that just to tie it all in, I think that is important.
Alderman Clements?
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Sullivan on that point. But where to have that discussion is when it comes up in the budget every year. So if we say, okay, and it's what happened last year, to be fair, that's what happened last year, right? There was $100,000 in there, and rather than spend it, the budget committee decided to take 25,000 of it and supplement GAD and cut the other 75,000. So there's precedent there for that to happen. And I think that's, you have to have some sort of baseline to have that discussion. And I think that's where the 100,000 comes in. And then you have your discussion at budget committee, and like the previous speaker said, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to adjust that if need be.
All right, Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the ordinance, and I don't see where it says it's not binding. It says starting with fiscal year 2024, an amount equivalent to the sum of parking revenue of 100,000 shall be appropriated annually in the budget to be used for the purpose of improving downtown, et cetera. So, we shouldn't pass legislation and then say, well, we can always, it's not really binding, we can always change it. Well, we shouldn't pass it. I'm not necessarily against this, but I think there are a lot of unanswered questions here. And I think what I don't like about this is that we've got this parking study that's about to be revealed. And this is, there's no urgency. I mean, we're talking about fiscal year 2024. And, so we got the parking study that's gonna come out any week now. And then we've got, a budget that the mayor and the department heads are going to put together and submit to the Budget Review Committee. And, this is saying that we're gonna give the Downtown Improvement Committee $100,000, no matter how much parking revenue there is. And I think, I don't like the idea of binding the people who put the budget together ahead of time. So I think there's some unanswered questions, so I don't know how far this will go, but rather than forcing me to vote against this tonight because of these questions, I'm gonna move that we table this so that we can get the answers that we're looking for, and then when we do vote on it, we can vote on it enthusiastically or not, but we'll know the answers to the questions we have.
The motion on the floor is to table. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at large, Alderman John Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderwoman at large, Shoshana Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Ernie Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman June Karen.
Yes.
Alderman Michael O'Brien Sr. votes yes. Chairman, Alderman Dowd.
Yes. Motion is tabled. Alderman Clements?
Yes, so I have a question. Can the committee come up with a list of things that they would like to see at the next committee meeting?
All right.
So that we can get that prepared. I can have Mary Lou get that prepared.
Please submit any questions you have to me and Donna, so that Donna we can get them to the committee to get back to us before it's considered again.
Thank you.
And is there any way we can find out if that parking study is going to be presented next month?
It's actually a meeting, he can tell you.
You don't want me
Again, the company, the vendor that we hired did an exhaustive study. There is a draft out, and I can get you the draft. I do not recommend it as bathroom reading, because you gotta be in there a while. It is that comprehensive. Okay, it involves, like I say, the salaries for the parking department. the infrastructure and the need for infrastructure repairs and comparative costs to parking meters, for example, such as what Manchester and other communities are paying. And it also looks at on-street parking, a lot of questions. Many of our streets aren't wide enough for overnight parking. So this was a pretty comprehensive study. It's done correctly. It's in the final review with certain people, community development, and it should be coming out relatively shortly for your reading pleasure.
Okay. Alderman Clemens?
Well,
You all set with your question?
Oh, well, I understand it, it's comprehensive, but even if someone from parking came and said, we're at this stage and we should be here with some final approval, but here's some tidbits, okay? Because parking and the meters is, I think, one of the prime pieces of that. Even if they gave us a little bit of a hint so we know what we're doing, if they're looking at a large sum for meter fees, is that what we're gonna take into consideration? So I just feel that, we've been hearing this since I came back on the board, every month that this was ready, and then I got told, I asked the question and they said definitely in December. So I'm just asking if that could be part and parcel of this, because this has been tabled a long time.
So it's a question to Alderman O'Brien,
Yeah, it did come, it's out, and
Okay.
like I say, it's in the hands of others.
Okay.
But with many of your questions, all this within the parking study is a recommendation. The full authority rests with the full Board of Aldermen. So to come out with anything would be short at this particular time, piecemealed or whatever would be short-sighted. There's going to be many different subjects that are going to need to be vetted by this, not only Committee of Infrastructure, but by the full Board of Aldermen. Case in point in the example, like you say, the parking meters. Do you want to be like Manchester and go up into the rates? Or, for right now, the average citizen in Nashua gets the bang for the buck. And I would also like to clearly state, there's nobody in the United States, there's no city, there is no town that really uses parking meters as a source of revenue. They're intended for one purpose and one purpose only, is that's to have a flush of customers and to create, organization so that the vendors, the people, the stakeholders on Main Street in the example can have people coming into their shops and stuff like that. If that was the case, that's why they chase you. You don't want an employee parking out in front of your business if you ran the business. That's not a good way to treat your customers. So to guard against that, that's why the parking meters.
So I'll say that this is under general discussion since we already tabled that other.
Yeah, I
motion.
would say so.
Alderman Clements, general discussion?
yes, thank you. In regards to the parking meter study, I would just caution this to relate too heavily on what we're doing with my ordinance with that, and not to say that they're not related, because they are. But there's a lot of discussion that has to be had. So let's say it does come out in January, right? There's gonna be a lot of discussion as to how much money, A, do we raise the meter revenue? Do we raise the meter rates? B, where do we raise the meter rates? Like, there's 3 different zones right now, right? C, are we raising the rates to not only fund the Downtown Improvement Committee as the ordinance exists now, which anything over $728,000 would automatically go to them if we did that? So mind you, if we raise the rates, we don't change this ordinance. The way that it's written right now is if we raise the rates and we started to make $1 million, then they'd get $350,000 a year. So the question isn't what are we gonna do with that? The question is, what are we gonna do for next year? Because the way that it's calculated, it will be that by the time January rolls around, that calendar year has already passed and the amount of money that would be allocated to them is determined, and it's going to be, whether Alderman Sullivan's right or I'm right, and it's more closer to, 600,000, either way, it's not gonna get to that point where they're over that threshold. So,
Don't go too far down, because we've.
I don't wanna go too far down, but
tabled
I'm just saying that the question before you is really, what are we gonna do for next year? Because again, the ordinance can always be changed.
this. Okay,
And I think there's too many variables to say what we wanna do for certain
till it's back off the table. It's
till
not
we
before
know
us.
what the parking study is, but this is more of a stopgap to say, okay, in June, we're gonna fund this much to the Downtown Improvement Committee.
So, my position on this is if we're concerned about giving them 100,000 all in one fell swoop, the ordinance probably should have been written to give them a percentage of the monies collected for parking. And it can be given out of more than once a year. You could say, when it gets to that amount, you give them this amount. When if we're gonna tie it to parking, and I don't think we ought to go down too much detail here because it's tabled. So, did you have a?
I was actually gonna say almost the exact same thing, and I was gonna ask the historical significance of the 728,000. We can talk about it when it comes off the table, but I was wondering is that even a relevant number?
The other
Where did it come from?
The other thing I wanted to mention is I get, I forget whether it was an email or a text message from Alderman Sullivan about a article in the Union Leader, which I happen to be reading at the exact time I got the message, that the new Performing Arts Center in Laconia is absolutely thrust the downtown in Laconia, which, believe me, is not something that's a lively place, into a great place to visit. Every show, 6 shows, I think it was 6 or 7, every one has been sold out, 750 seats, just like ours, and it's run by the same company as ours, Spectacle, and it's doing great, and it's improving the entire economy of the downtown. So things may change significantly, we hope, when the Performing Arts Center's. I don't know if you want to comment on that same thing, Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, Alderman Dowd, as you know, I do have a connection with Laconia. And over the years, I saw vacant storefronts. One of my greatest fears, some of the newer aldermen, but some of the older aldermen, we really feared the COVID. I really thought that there was gonna be plywood up on the storefronts and stuff like that. And thanks to the wisdom of everybody involved, we survived it. But Laconia did not fare well. And there was many vacant storefronts. I'm happy to say that every storefront in the Laconia area, I don't think you could get a storefront now. They've all been repopulated and selling. And a friend of mine owns that consignment shop that's right down the street. And he says, you won't believe the offer that was made for his property. But he says, this is my part-time fun, I'm retired. This is, what I like to do. So, there was many shops, I was in my internal, request or looking for, my quest to look for cast iron frying pans. I had the fetish for cast iron since I've been on the fire department. It's the original non-stick, let me tell you, but the thing is now, what used to be like a secondhand store, they're all now bakeries and other things. There's another thing that came into play. Cake, which is Chaos and Kindness, they opened up another theater there too. So, as we lead into discussion in the future of Elm Street, possibly something to put in the back of your mind as well. But I think the average citizens in Nashua is going to see the difference and the proof in the pudding, so to speak. And thank you for, submitting that. We heard a lot of, the naysayers. Let's see how it goes. I would like to sit on that fence and giggle and say, well, geez, look at it, we're doing all right.
Any other general comments? Alderman Kelly?
I just wanted to thank, I believe it was Alderman Sullivan who shared that. I actually grew up there as well, so I used to go to that theater when it was a movie theater. And I don't know if you've ever been to the soda shop, but it just reopened. That was a big place I went when I was a kid. They had the little things in the front. Anyways,
Yeah.
it was lovely to see that they're having a vibrance
Yeah.
downtown because of it, and I'm looking forward to our Performing Arts Center opening.
Yeah, it's been a sleepy hollow. Any other general comments? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to my fellow Budget Review Committee members, I'm sure, I'm sure you, as like me, have received many communications from our constituents about the effect of the combination of the revaluation and well, because of the revaluation, the tax rate went down, but the net effect on people, and I don't know if it's most cases, but a lot of people are getting tax bills higher than what they were paying before. And so I think for a long time, and people have pointed out that we're limited as to what we can do. We have to play the hand that is dealt to us by the state, but we have to do whatever we can to deal that hand skillfully. And one of the things that I think that we can do, is try to generate more revenue. And one of the ways of generating more revenue is and I think we've been doing that. Some of the departments have reviewed their fee schedules, and so we're seeing some increase in that regard. With all due respect to the chairman of the Infrastructure Committee, it is true that there are parts of our parking scheme. Again, it's not a derogatory word, parking plan. Like on Main Street, we do charge more for Main Street. And the time is more limited for the purpose that you indicated, to increase turnover. But we do have parking areas where there's all-day parking, there's 10-hour parking. And so those areas are not designed for turnover. They're designed, that's where we hope the employees go and park all day long and leave the Main Street spots open. So, there are parts of our parking plan, that does have revenue as one of its objectives. That's how we pay for maintaining the parking garages. Hopefully providing funding for the Downtown Improvement Committee. And so the more money we can generate, reasonably, not gouging anybody, but, charging a fair amount, for service that's worth it, is something that we ought to look more at and not just dismiss out of hand. So, thank you.
Alderman Bryant?
Yeah, thank Alderman Jettie for bringing that up. But I would like to stop anybody for those internal search for the 10-hour parking spaces. They don't really exist for the public. I think what you're referring to, Alderman Jettie, is some of the municipal lots are rented out to individual businesses. You can see it. It's the green tag that has a number on it on the wall. That spot is selected and rented by that particular business for their employees or whoever. And so therefore, you're not really supposed to park there. They're not meant for the public uses. But it allows them to park there, for an extended period of time. The rest of us are confined to a meter. So, just a clarification.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I got up this morning, 4:30, to do a 5:30 interview for the United Way Telethon, which is a great event, and tomorrow's the day of caring, or the day of giving, I should say. And then, came home, worked till 6 o'clock tonight, came to the Historic District Commission meeting, 6:30, came here to the Board of Aldermen meeting, and now I'm here at a meeting I don't really have to be at. I could have been home, 2 hours ago, having dinner with my children, my wife. But I'm not. I'm still here at 9:25. And when I come to these meetings, I'm here for my constituents. I'm not here because they're enjoyable watching everybody argue about something. I'm here to ask questions, to listen, to understand what's going on. And while everybody else is filibustering, I should be allowed to say what I need to say or the questions I need to ask. And so if I don't need to come to these meetings anymore, I won't. If I'm not part of this committee, maybe I shouldn't be part of this committee. I shouldn't be coming in here. And I can stay home, and the 5 of you, 7 of you, however many's on this committee, can vote, and I'll just rubber stamp whatever you guys want when it gets to the Board of Aldermen meeting. You guys tell me. But, I thought the right thing is to come to these committees and to debate these issues that we're talking about so we can make a decision. I wasn't happy with the decision made tonight, but I certainly is what the committee's there for, is to debate issues and to decide where you want to go with it, whether approve it, not approve it, or go to tabling. And so, that's why I come to these meetings. I come here because that's what I was elected to do, is to understand what goes on in the city and to ask the questions I need to ask and to understand the things I need to understand so I can go back to my constituents and tell them. And I assume that's what we're all here for. But that's all I got. Good night.
That's fine, and as long as you stay on topic. You mentioned about GAD. I
didn't mention
stopped-
GAD. I did not mention GAD. That came from over there.
Yes, and I stopped him from talking about GAD, so it goes both ways. That's the job of the chairman, is to keep us on track, keep us on point.
I know. You want to get home. I got it. We can move on.
All right. Any other general discussion? Seeing none, there's no public comment, there's no one here. Remarks by Alderman? Seeing none, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:26.